The PAC was more Africanist in outlook. But then there were those, in particular those who were members of the Communist Party, there was the Communist Party of South Africa and all those things, who felt that no, as stated by the Freedom Charter, that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. The guys in the PAC said that's rubbish. South Africa belongs to Africans. One of the most important developments in the build-up to June 16, 1976 was an activity that the Boers launched to try now and make us feel that they are now changing things. Because one of the things, I don't know if you're aware, that black people could not play with or against white people in any sport. And we started singing Nkosi Sikelele i-Afrika. And in those days, to sing Nkosi Sikelele i-Afrika, never mind at an event such as that one, but generally it was an act of defiance on the part of us as black people, because they did not recognize Nkosi Sikelele i-Afrika as a national anthem.
In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or position of this channel, its hosts, or affiliates. This podcast is a platform for open discussions and exploration of various perspectives, including controversial and unconventional ideas. We encourage viewers to think critically, do their own research, and form their own opinions. The content is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as fact, advice, or an endorsement of any specific viewpoint. Viewers' discretion is advised. Umoya ulight, umoya upright. Welcome to another episode of MOYA Political Series. Thank you for all the support you're giving us. We see the numbers are growing. Slow and steady wins the race. Thank you for watching the adverts all the way to the end. Please, guys, thank you. Thank you to our members who help us keep our lights on every single month. So always a privilege to give you the education that you're not going to get at the Mlungu schools. There's a lot of changes going on in the country at the moment, especially around the Madlanga Commission. We thought, let's bring in an elder so that we can understand our history, so that we can have better understanding of what's happening now, so that we can change things for tomorrow. Ntate OBBEY MABENA, thank you so much for agreeing to come to MOYA Podcast. What we know about you is that you were one of the MK guerrillas in Angola. So we are so privileged. Can you give us that part of our history? And can you take it from the establishment of MK here and how you guys leave? So basically, it's actually from the beginning of your story as a young man and how you get into the MK.
Yeah, thank you very much for your generous introduction. And very briefly, and I'm happy that you want me to go back to where everything started. Maybe I should give a brief background to how I came to be where I am today. Namely that, like all children of my time, I was born into a religious background. We used to go to Sunday school, and without even understanding why we had to go there, because we went because we found that it was in the family. But then I think I must have been about 9 years when one day I came home and I confronted my mom. One good thing about me and my mom is that we're very open with one another. There's nothing that was out of bounds. We talked about everything and anything. So I came back from Sunday school one Sunday, and I said, Mom, you know, there's something that I would like to get some explanation about. There at the church where we go to Sunday school and all those things, all the pictures of people who are religious, of white people. The only person who bears some resemblance to us black people is the devil. He even has a tail. Now, what I would like to know from you, Mom, is the explanation to why we're living in the townships and whites are living in the cities. They are going to better schools and live in better houses and all those things. Does this not have to do with those pictures in the church, at the church? My poor mom said to me, look, son, there are things that are not questioned. And that, what you are asking now, is one of those things. I said to him, Mom, listen very carefully. I want an explanation. And if I don't get it, I will never go to Sunday school again. Cut a long story short, that's how I stopped going to Sunday school. But then, I'm saying this because now looking back to how I grew up, I was always questioning things, even at school. I never took anything that I was taught at face value. I used to argue with my teachers. Fast forward, when I was growing up in Soweto, there's a time when the Black consciousness movement came to the fore.
This is around which year?
This is in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. And Black consciousness moved like wildfire because it answered a lot of questions that people like myself had. Needless to say that it inspired us to start thinking about solving the problem. Because one good thing about Steve Biko is that Steve Biko, tackled the real problem that we as oppressed South Africans have. That is our mind. Because the Boers had successfully stripped us of our self-esteem. Again, I think, and that's where the genius of Steve Biko lay. Because one of his earlier slogans were that black is beautiful. And he did it so effectively that he found that even our young black sisters stopped trying to have their hair stretched and using the skin toners to appear white, because as black people we're supposed to be inferior to white people, we're supposed to be ugly. And our hair also signified inferiority. He did away with all that. And then some of us, for the first time, began to see the real beauty of black people, especially black ladies, because they've not even stretched their hair or use afros and all, use these wigs and all those things so that they've got hair that looks almost like those of white people or Indians. But fast forward now. Part of my background was that I hail from a family of about 10. And my dad left us as a family when I was 15 years old. Whereupon I had to assume the role of a breadwinner for my family at that age, at the age of 15. Needless to mention that this also had its very serious role in my eventual decision to leave South Africa to get arms and training to come and fight apartheid. Because I discovered that wherever I went, I still remember, I started to work in 1965. 1965, I was 15 years old. And then I worked until 1975. By 1975, when I stopped working, the last time I worked, I'd gone through no fewer than 14 different companies, notwithstanding the responsibility that I had of being a breadwinner for a family of 10. But I used to fight with Boers because more than half of them were far more stupid than I am. But they were supposed to be now my supervisors simply because they were white. That I couldn't accept. And the result is that I even resolved in the course of that life never ever to tell my mom when I leave a job. I would only tell her when I'm already in a new job. Or sometimes she would ask me, hey, how come it seems now you've got more money than before? What's happening? And then I'll say, oh, by the way, Mom, I forgot to tell you. I left that job. I'm in a new job. And it's paying me better than the previous one. But it was through such experiences that more and more one realized that there's something seriously wrong about our country. And then, of course, at that age, we were becoming more and more aware of the creation of Umkhonto weSizwe by the Nelson Mandelas of this world, or Sisulu's and all those people, whereupon in 1961, December, on the 16th of December 1961, they announced the birth of Umkhonto weSizwe. And
which was to be the military wing.
Yeah, it was to be the military wing of the African National Congress, because I think that question is also very relevant in that we will know that the ANC was formed in 1912. And from 1912 to 1961, okay, there's a lot of things that happened, like in 1943 when the ANC Youth League was formed, which also brought about a more, robust engagement with our oppressors for our liberation. But 1955, there was what was known as the Congress of the People in Cape Town, where people from all walks of life met to deliberate on what kind of a South Africa they would have loved to have. And what came out of that engagement was the Freedom Charter. Now, that was a very, very powerful document in that it also has its own part in how some of us turn out to be. Because up to this day, if we had the kind of an ANC that some of us joined when we joined the ANC, that ANC would have used that Freedom Charter. And there's no real South African, I don't care whether you're green, yellow, or brown, who would not have embraced that document. So there was that in 1955, and then from 1955 to 1961, nothing. We're not making any progress because the leadership of the ANC at that time confined itself to sending delegations to, because South Africa by then was still under British colonialism. It had not yet become a country that was not part of the British Empire. That happened also around, I think it was 1960. And that's when even the currency, our currency, that as we know it today, the rand, until then we're using the British sterling, the British pound, the 7 about 2 and 6, right, and all those things, about pounds. So 1961, in the build-up towards 1961, slowly but surely, the ANC, as an offshoot from the formation of your youth league in 1943, the ANC was becoming more and more radicalized because the youth of the time was saying, no man, this thing of these delegations that goes to the British Crown to go and plead our case.
And who's the president at that time?
At that time, the president was Chief Albert Luthuli.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So the Mandelas, Bo Anton Limbede, and many others. There was no PAC at that time. The PAC only came into being in 1959, where there was some fallout within the ANC in terms of the approach to the struggle. The PAC was more Africanist in outlook. But then there were those, in particular those who were members of the Communist Party, there was the Communist Party of South Africa and all those things, who felt that no, as stated by the Freedom Charter, that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. The guys in the PAC said that's rubbish. South Africa belongs to Africans, not to all those who live in it. And that was the fallout. That's how the PAC came into being, and the ANC remained as the ANC that it was. But in 1961, it was becoming clear that now, okay, before that, the Communist Party, I think, was banned around 1960 as a legal political organization in South Africa. It was banned. After it was banned, it became clear that it's going to be only a matter of time before the ANC itself is banned. Now, Chief Albert Luthuli, in his wisdom and foresightedness, instructed Oliver Tambo to go to exile and form the ANC in exile in anticipation of its banning in South Africa, that it was not going to be legal anymore. So it had to be able to continue from now outside the borders of South Africa. And at the same time, Chief Albert Luthuli spoke to Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi, known as Gaja Buthelezi, that he should form something. Again, the brilliance of that old man. No wonder the Boers had no choice but to kill him. He said, now look, you, Buthelezi, form a cultural organization which will organize not as a political party, whereas we know it will be existing for the furtherance of what the African National Congress stands for. And so it happened that Mangosuthu Buthelezi formed Inkatha Yesizwe. and then Inkatha remained. Then it was around those times that the youth of the ANC now, in the persons of your Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Motsoaledi Mlangeni, Anton Lembede, and all those people decided to form now a military wing for the African National Congress. And they called it Umkhonto Wesizwe. And to announce the birth of Umkhonto Wesizwe, they selected the 16th of December. And they went around placing explosives on these electric pylons. And lo and behold, 16th, they started exploding all over. Needless to say that the Boers had the scare of their lives. They never thought they could experience such. In a way, this is what I think our enemies call terrorism, because they were terrorized out of their wits. Yes. They were terrorized, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Terrorized out of their wits and all those things, but eventually they were rounded up and arrested. And then after being arrested, a long trial started, which came to be known as the treason trial. And then later on, a book was to be written about that trial. Needless to mention that that book itself was also banned in South Africa. It was not allowed you were not allowed to carry that book. I think if you were to be caught with the book, you could easily get 5 years on Robben Island, just for being caught with that book. So now, those of us who are calling ourselves activists now, we're now circulating that book underground. You read that book, and once you have read that book, you are recognized now as one of the people who are with it, and yes, this is it. But then, they were rounded up, they were convicted, and sent to Robben Island. After they'd been sent to Robben Island, that was around 63, 64, there was a big lull in terms of the struggle against the Boers. Because now, you know, the birth of Umkhonto Wesizwe, you know, gave us hope like nothing had ever done. That yes, we are now going to find our freedom. But now the arrest of all of them, you know, put paid to all those hopes. And those who were not arrested were members of the ANC. You know, when we look back sometimes and we discuss this amongst ourselves, we say they went deep underground. There was no talk. People were even afraid to mention the name of Mandela. It was hush-hush to mention Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and all those people. They hear you at your home talking about such names. But anyway, I'm a member of the African National Congress, but I'm not a praise singer of the African National Congress. For me, it is South Africa first, then anything else, even political organization or whatever belief I have. South Africa comes first. And that being the case, when I left South Africa in now I'm fast forwarding. When I left South Africa in 1976 to join the struggle.
Can I ask a question before you get there?
Yes.
Because you've given us the context, but you were saying between 65 and 75, that's when you were working there?
Yes.
Because then you're about to get into, you go into exile 76. But I want to know, in this 10 years, What's happening to you politically? What's your lived experience?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a relevant question. Number one, I did mention earlier on that I was changing jobs like there's no tomorrow because I was always fighting. I remember one incident. There's a company called Highveld Steel and Vanadium in Mpumalanga, but it was not called Mpumalanga then. It was the Transvaal province. So I got a job there because around 1969 I got myself a driver's license so that I can earn better money. Now I get a job there, I was employed and I was working there. Needless to mention that I was the youngest of the people I was working with there, and we're driving trucks there. Now, as we're driving these trucks, one day there was this other colleague of ours, Ubab Masego. He was Masego. He accidentally, and he was fooling around actually, to tell the truth, and he crashed the truck. Not very seriously, but it was enough for him to be fired. And remember, I'm the youngest. He was old enough to be my dad. And I could see that he was devastated that he was going to lose the job. So I approached him. I said, hey, look here, leave this thing to me. Let me handle it. And then when our manager came around, because he was not there, an Afrikaner guy, I went to him. I told him that, look, I can't remember the exact yarn that I spun, but namely explaining away how the accident happened and that it was something beyond anybody's control that it happened. I didn't even mention the name of Ubab Maseko. Then the poor bought the story. And Maseko was saved. A few days later, the poor comes to me. He says to me, why did you lie to me? I said, what do you mean? He said, about that story of the crashing of the truck. I said, what do you mean I lie? He says, no, I know the truth. I said, who told you? He said, Maseko told me. And the way the poor was saying it, I realized that the poor was telling the truth. I said to him, then I've got nothing to say. He said, then I'm firing you. That's how I lost my job. But that was me. Wherever I went, I would always be on the defense of my colleagues. And eventually, I think it was 1970, let me see, 70, 71. Around 1971, it's such a long time ago now, I got a job with a company going under the name of Shell and BP in Maritzburg, next to Chris's station. I won't go into the details of that, but it so happens that I became one of the first 4 black people in South Africa to be employed in that kind of a job of driving these petrol tankers and delivering petrol. Because until then, those trucks were driven by white people only. This thing that they are making so much noise about, this thing of cadre deployment or that kind of nonsense, they are the architects of it. It started with them. It was called job reservation, where certain jobs were reserved for white people. And black people, it doesn't matter how competent you were and how well you could do the job, simply by virtue of being black, you were proscribed from taking up such a job. But then, as the economy of this country was now developing, they had no choice but to start employing black people. They started with coloreds, but not before long, they started. Now, I happened to be one of the first 4 guys who had to do the job. And when we got there, I was not educated in the sense that Africans were said to be educated under Bantu education when you've done your JC, your matric, or your BA degree. Because remember, I had to start work at the age of 15. So at the age of 15, I was doing standard 5. And talking about which, I should mention also that I never did standard 3. I was promoted from standard 2 to standard 4. And even when I got to standard 4, I was doing so well as standard 5. And when I left school, the school principal even came to my mom to offer taking over my tuition, paying for me and all those things. But my mom told him that no, the problem was much more serious than that. And as it is, I didn't encourage him to go to work. He decided upon himself. He went and looked for a job, and he's working. So I got I got this job of driving trucks, petrol tankers, and the way we were employed there, we were taken through some tests. They call them mathematical tests and all over and above, driving competence and all those things. So we passed those, but it turned out that again, because we were black, the tests that we were given, I don't think the depot manager could have passed those tests. So the least educated whom I was, the least educated of us was more educated than the depot manager. Be that as it may, we worked there. But soon after my joining that company, they started employing more blacks, and they started employing more blacks. I joined the trade union movement. And having joined the trade union movement, was it people like Alec Ewing, Joyce Kakan, and all those people of those days. So I brought this idea of a trade union to the depot, to my colleagues. And needless again to mention that around those days...
This is how the politics starts seeping in now.
No, the politics were long there. I mean, that's why I was even leaving job after job, because yes, I would fight purely. My fight with them was over.
It was political.
Yes. Even when I left Sunday school.
It was political.
It was political.
Yes.
So now, I started mobilizing my fellow drivers. Although in those days, there was no law that said blacks cannot belong to trade unions. But once you are found to be associated with trade unions, then you could even end up in prison, charged under the Suppression of Terrorism and Communism Act, which carried a minimum sentence of 5 years. But around that time, things were beginning to ease up somewhat, because I mentioned earlier that now Steve Biko came about to fill in the gap that was created with the detention of Mandela and his comrades. So Steve Biko spread like wildfire with this philosophy of his of Black Consciousness movement, and he organized students at...
Okay, so the treason trial was 75?
The treason trial was 1963.
Oh.
Then there was a lull.
Okay.
And then that lull, I think somewhere in the second half of the 60s.
Yes.
Then Steve Biko came up. Came up, organization called what's in
DCM, Black Consciousness.
BCM, BCP or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then thereafter there was SASO at university level, that is South African Students Organization. And then at high school level, there was SASM, South African Students Movement, and so on and so forth, which came to be led by Tsietsi Mashinini and the likes of Hotso Siatlulo and many other people, students.
Sure.
But then, this time, I was not a student, I was not a teacher. I had been a worker for a very long time now, and I was continuing to work, but I was interested in the activities of the Black Consciousness Movement. And at the same time, I stumbled upon a broadcast from Lusaka of the African National Congress, which was entitled Radio Freedom. Yeah, and one of the main guys was very, very, very powerful, you know, in getting the message across of our struggle, why it was necessary to fight, and all those things. But until then, no real fighting had taken place in inside South Africa by Umkhonto weSizwe. It's a topic for another day. You know, this thing is too long. Then there was this guy, his brother was Curtis Nkondo, who after June 16 in Soweto was part of a group of 10 Soweto prominent people, for example, Dr. Motlana and such like people. They were a committee of 10 which was trying to organize the community into doing whatever needs to be done. I think maybe they were also behind this thing of street committees and things like that. Now, meanwhile, we were working there now. I was still working, and then was with the trade union movement, and I think it was around 1973 that a strike broke out in Durban in a textile company called Frame. It was a very big textile company in Durban. The workers there went out on strike, and that strike took off like wildfire. You know, it moved from Durban through Natal, the then Natal, which is now called KZN, into the Transvaal, where we are now in Johannesburg. It was a very, very, very serious and very powerful strike. You know, people started feeling now, yeah, we are dealing with the Boers. Now, while that strike was going on, there was a coup d'etat in Portugal on the 25th of April, 1974. Now, this coup d'etat in Portugal was led by General Antonio de Espinola. Now, General Antonio de Espinola was one of the generals in the Portuguese army. You will know that countries like Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau and Principe, Sao Tome and so on, all those former Portuguese colonies were under Portuguese colonialism. And with that, what caused that coup d'etat in Portugal, the violent overthrow of the government, the Portuguese government? These guys, upon taking over the country, Portugal, they said, we are no longer having anything to do with the colonies. And partly what brought that about was the fact that there were liberation movements like we had also in South Africa. We had Umkhonto weSizwe. In Mozambique, there was Frelimo. In Angola, there was FAPLA under the MPLA. And in Guinea-Bissau, there was the PAIGC and so on and so forth. So the Portuguese were having to send their young soldiers to go and fight in these colonies. And these generals now came together and said, no, this is rubbish. Those countries have got nothing to do with us. Why do we have to go and fight those people and we go and die? Because I think the real thing was the fact that they were dying. If they were not dying, I doubt if they would have rose up against their government. So, 25th of April, suddenly, Mozambique was no longer under Portuguese rule. Angola was no longer under Portuguese rule, and so on and so forth. We got so excited in South Africa. You won't believe. The students of SASO and all those people, there were others even called NAYO, I can't remember what they were about, but they quickly organized what came to be known as the Pro-Frelimo Rally, because it inspired us. Now remember, this is coming in the wake of the Black Consciousness movement, which has conscientized us to how our struggle should be fought and how our struggle is connected with the struggle in Mozambique and so on and so forth. So hence the excitement. We felt that if the Mozambicans are now becoming a government, it's only a matter of time that we become a government ourselves. And mind you, the ANC, through Radio Freedom, to some of us, it became clear that up until then, although MK was formed in 1961, there had been no fighting that we had been aware of that had taken place, at least on the South African soil, by forces of Umkhonto weSizwe. We picked up here and there that they'd been caught in the company of Zimbabwean guerrilla fighters who were fighting against British colonialism, and later they fought against Ian Smith. And then the MK, in order to be able to get to South Africa, they thought that if they go with the Zimbabweans and they fight when they come across the Zimbabwean enemy, but their ultimate objective would be to come into South Africa and fight in South Africa. But then South Africa reinforced the Zimbabwean, or then it was not Zimbabwe, it was Rhodesia, the Rhodesian forces to fight the joint Zimbabwe, Rhodesian fighters and South African fighters. Well, the turn of things where the Portuguese colonies were becoming liberated, amongst other things, meant that now we've got friendly forces next door. We will be able now to wage our struggle, or so we thought then, to wage our struggle from Mozambique crossing into South Africa, where South Africa is sharing borders with so it was going to be easy. Then a lot of people were arrested for organizing that rally. In my own case, my first brush with the security branch was after I had gone on a visit to the then Lorenzo Marx, which you now know as Maputo. It was called Lorenzo Marx. So I drove to Lorenzo Marx. When I got there, I tried to find the ANC, because from listening to Radio Freedom, I expected that when I go to Mozambique, which is now under Frelimo, although the independence of Mozambique had not as then been proclaimed, but Frelimo was now the liberation movement, the leading liberation movement, and it was returning into the country. And there was excitement in Mozambique. I went there. Then, when I got there, I was frustrated to find that I couldn't communicate with the people of Mozambique because they spoke Chironga and Portuguese. And I was only there for a weekend. And trying to communicate with people was not getting me anywhere, and time had come for me to come back. And I came back, but I resolved there and then that I'm coming back to this country. And when I come back, I'm going to learn to speak the languages that are spoken here so that I can establish contact with the ANC. So I came back. I think a couple of months thereafter, my leave was due. Remember, I was still working now for Shell and BP now. So I went there. When I got there, within a week of being there, I could already participate in serious discussions with the people there in Portuguese. I picked up Portuguese, and that helped me a lot. Then I came back again, needless to say, but even then I couldn't establish any contact with the ANC. Then I came back. After coming back, came home one day, there was a message for me from Protea Security Branch. The message was saying, report at Protea Security Branch and ask for Captain Fesser, bring your passport with. Then I said, no, this is now trouble. This is now, in a way, at the back of my mind, I felt that, is this visit to Mozambique? Because we had seen what happened even with your Prof. Relly Morales and all those things. So anyway, I went to Protea. I got to Protea. I got there. As I was going there, I told myself, you know what? If there's anything that's going to get you out of that place in one piece, it is the Afrikaans language. Now, fortunately, I am Ndebele. And in a way, Ndebele is part of our language. So when I got there, coming from Soweto, speaking Afrikaans, because when I got there, I found that in those days, I don't know later what happened, but in those days, you go there to Protea about things like this. You're not going to talk to a black. You can somebody basprat. So I got there, was taken to an office where there was this Mr. Kokemur who started quizzing me about my visits to Mozambique and Swaziland, because I used to go to Swaziland a lot in those days, just on visits and so on and so forth. Then I spun such a good yarn, but I think what did the trick was the fact that I was speaking Afrikaans. In my generation, speaking Afrikaans, especially being in Soweto, although places like Rockville and Meadowlands, because they came from Sophia town, a lot of people there were speaking Afrikaans. But in the rest of Soweto, we never bothered to speak Afrikaans, and even when the police speak to us or they stop us on the roads, we speak to them in English, which made them hate us even more. So I spoke Afrikaans, good Afrikaans. I was very good in Afrikaans. Then they let me go. I went home. I said, now I can't go to Mozambique anymore, because I had planned to go back again. But then meanwhile, when I was traveling in Swaziland, I made friends with quite a number of people, one of whom was one who even ended up being Mandela's son-in-law. He was a son to the king. This was the king, Sopuza. So now we were talking, and we'd been talking about some of these things about the struggle in South Africa, but it never crossed my mind to ask him about the ANC. But this time now, after being frustrated by having been dragged into Protea and being questioned about my visits, I was still reeling from this thing on my next visit to Swaziland. So we're sitting, I said to him, you know, I've been in Mozambique and I was hoping I would meet with these people of the ANC. And I never got around meeting them. And right now, the security branch is making it impossible for me to continue to go to Mozambique. I think if I can go again, they'll arrest me. So this guy said to me, oh, so you want to meet these guys of the ANC? I said, yes. He said, they are here. I said, no, you must be joking. He said, no, they are here. I said, can we go and see them now? He said, fine. We went to Swaziland. We went to Manzini because we were in Baban. So he said, no, let's go and see one of them. He's teaching there. It was Stanley Madizela from UTNH. He was one of the leaders of the ANC. But almost nobody knew about him, being he was just a teacher there and all those things at a school called Saligen. So we went there. When we got there, now I was with Funda Nengosi. He went there to his office and then, I can't remember, I think he was a principal there. So he greeted him and introduced me and told him that, no, I'm trying to make contact with the ANC. So he wanted to know, well, now, why do you want to contact the ANC? I said, no, because I've decided to go for military training. Now I've heard over Radio Freedom that you are training people and all those things. He said, okay, it's fine. Let's do this. Let's meet at the State House because they were given a place in the State House in Swaziland. He said, no, let's meet at the State House where I'll be with my other colleague in the leadership. So we'll discuss everything there. Lo and behold, that evening we went there, we met them, and then that was March 1976. And maybe a little background to that. March 1976, the students' activities were really hotting up now, combined with this thing of black consciousness and the developments in the Portuguese colony. The Boers were really losing it. In fact, there are so many things that were happening. That is why I was saying maybe this thing could need to be serialized, because one of the most important developments in the build-up to June 16, 1976 was an activity that the Boers launched to try now and make us feel that they are now changing things. Because one of the things, I don't know if you're aware, that black people could not play with or against white people in any sport. And our main sport here in Soweto was soccer. And our teams could not play for white teams, but then, our players could not play for white teams, and our teams could not play against white teams. Whites were playing alone, blacks were playing alone. So in 1975, towards the end of 1975, in fact, somewhere in the middle of 1975, they announced an event that was to take place, which was to be between blacks and whites. It was promoted by an American motor company called Chevrolet. In those days, we didn't have these things that you call taxis now here. There's, what do you call them? Anyway, they were using what was known as Six Mabone. The Chevrolet, those were our taxis, Six Mabone, Mpalambala, and all those things. Now, those were the cars. And then, of course, some of us, like myself, my first car was a Valiant. I bought myself a Valiant, 65 Valiant, and so on and so forth. So the Americans sponsored this tournament. working with the Boers to put this thing together. They said, okay, white football teams are going to engage in a tournament which was to be about an elimination. They play against each other until only one team remains the top of all the other teams. They eliminate one another and all those things. And the same was to happen with black people. And then the final was to be played between the top team amongst the whites and the top team amongst the blacks. And the team that emerged victorious on the black side was Kaizer Chiefs, of which I was a member, and by the way, I was amongst the founder members of Kaizer Chiefs. So Kaizer Chiefs was the winner. And then on the white side, there was a Hellenics Greek team from Cape Town. They were the ones who won. Then the match between the two now was to take place at Rand Stadium. Now, Rand Stadium was a white people's stadium. Okay, some few blacks by then could go in there, but they don't sit on the same seats with white people. Blacks one side and whites. Now, on this particular day or tournament, when you get to Rand Stadium, they divided the stadium into two parts. There was one part, because it was south to north, and then if you take it from this corner to this corner, like this was the side on which white people were sitting. And then from here to here, it was us blacks. Now, when we play in Soweto, now in those days we're now playing at Orlando Stadium. There was Orlando Stadium. When we get to Orlando Stadium, if Kaizer Chiefs is playing Orlando Pirates, the Orlando Pirates sit one side, and then Kaizer Chiefs another side, or we're playing Rocker Swallows or Pimville, United Brothers. It was like that. But now, this day, there was no Orlando Pirates, Kaizer Chiefs stuff there. We were all blacks, and blacks were to sit this side. And in any case, because also I think the conscientization of Steve Biko and all those things, the climate had reached a point where when we got there was no case of, I'm Kaizer Chiefs, you are Orlando Pirates, or what. We are rivals. We are rivals there in Soweto. But here, it's blacks versus whites. Right, end of the story. So we got in there. When we got into the stadium, the atmosphere, I'm telling you, my sister, you could cut it with a knife. Yeah, you know, that day, we were all feeling that now, anything is possible today. So we got in, and then I still remember I was sitting with, what's name, Kaiser's sister, Sheila Mtaung. We were close then, so we're sitting on the southern side of the stadium. And then sitting there, the goalposts were just ahead of us because we were to score as Kaizer Chiefs on the southern goalpost, and the whites, where Hellenics was to score on the northern. So everything started on our side. But before the match could start, where they had to sing the stem, which was the national anthem then. Now, if you look at the ground, exactly the way we were distributed there, that we blacks are from this corner to this corner. Now, down on around the ground, the policemen now. Black policemen were this side with us, on the side of the blacks, but down there, around the... And then the white policemen were also this side to this side. So when things started, they started to sing the stem because this was an official match. The Minister of Sport, Pete Korenhoff, was there, and some other cabinet ministers were also there. The government of the Apartheid government was also there. Of course, not to mention that they were sitting with whites, with their fellow whites that side. So they stood up to sing the stem. They sang it. We didn't bother them. And they finished it. Oh, no. As they were starting to sing it, the police, you know, the police are part of the state. They must stand, whether you're black or white, whether it's apartheid or not. But when they sing the stem, you have to stand up and take off your head, whatever. So now, our brothers here in front of us, I felt sorry afterwards for these poor guys. They started standing up also like their colleagues, white colleagues, but who were that side. As they started, that's the day I realized the limitations of my voice. I never tried to scream the way I screamed that way. I said, hey, don't stand for that shit. Sit down, sit down. And everybody joined in. And remember then we were with these guys from Pirates. They were a bit wilder than us of the chiefs. There was a group that was known as Amakwaitos. Yeah, they were taking no nonsense from nobody. So we screamed. And the poor guys, the way we screamed, they had no choice but to sit down. The poor policeman sat down the blacks. Yes. A white policeman moved from that side to try and stand up. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but it's clear he was telling them to stand up. And they decided to, for some reason, they couldn't stand the noise that we were making. So they continued to sit. And then they sang their stem. When they finished, I don't know how they started, but we all stood up. And we started singing Nkosi Sikelele i-Afrika. And in those days, to sing Nkosi Sikelele i-Afrika, never mind at an event such as that one, but generally it was an act of defiance on the part of us as black people, because they did not recognize Nkosi Sikelele i-Afrika as a national anthem. But we did not recognize their stem. That's why when they were singing it, we sat down. And then when they finished, when they sat down, we stood up. And my sister, I'm telling you, to this day, I don't remember hearing Nkosi Sikelele i-Afrika sung with that kind of gusto. You know, I can still see it vividly in my mind as I'm talking about it. Anyway, fast forward. They didn't interfere with us until we finished. Who won the game? That's where I'm going now.
Oh, okay.
They didn't interfere with us. When we finished and the match started, they had brought in a British referee, right? And now this was to show some kind of impartiality or whatever nonsense they thought. Why go and choose a British guy? Why didn't they get somebody from Zambia to come and do it? You see? So anyway, the match started. Few minutes, no time. Within a few minutes, this guy, Asin Swelling, just went through their back lines. 1-2, 1-2, into the net. Sure. When the ball went into the net, the British referee blew his whistle and declared it a offside. Now, you know, everybody was stunned. Now some Kwaitos were getting restless now. I stood up because I don't know what made. I stood up. I said, no, guys, maybe in England, that's how they judge. Let's see what is he going to do when the whites also score that side. Whether it's going to judge the same way that he is. But it was clear, it was not a offside. But anyway, cut a long story short, the ball started again. But Kaizer Chiefs was far superior to Hellenics, such that if you understand soccer, they were playing a half ground. It was the
Hellenic was defending.
Yeah, Hellenic was defending.
Yes.
But then, just across the center line, there was this guy from Hellenic. He was standing alone. I don't know what was happening. Then they managed to get a ball out across to him. But that was a clear offside, my sister. You don't have to understand soccer. This guy took the ball from the center line, just across the center line, went straight to the goal post. We were quiet, all of us. We wanted to see whether what we're seeing was really what was happening. This guy went. And then as he was approaching the goal post now, our goalkeeper was Banks Clody, a homeboy of Ace and Zwelling. As they were approaching the goal post, Banks Clody walked out of the goal post. He walked out. So no, come and score. You're alone.
Exactly.
He stood aside next to the pole, and this white guy blasted the net. And then then the referee went to the center line. But where, you remember, that's why I was telling you how we distributed around the stadium. Now, this side, it was the black audiences. Now, he comes here on this side, and he calls the ball to the center. He's allowing that goal. Now, once he was calling them to the center, I don't know what happened on this side, the spectators this side. To this day, I don't know who did it. But what happened is this referee was hit with a can of cool drink. We used to call them groovies. I don't know if you know about groovies. Yeah. You know, that guy was so good. He hit the referee here with a can, a groovy. And it opened upon hitting him. It hit him so that it opened. Blood oozed and with the cold drink. The World newspaper, which was our newspaper of the time, on Monday, on the front page, had a picture of that referee with blood flowing with the cold drink, mixed with cold drink. Then, after that, all hell broke loose. The missiles that were coming from the stadium, I mean from anyway, from the spectators now, onto the ground. I don't know. By the way, I'm not talking about Orlando Stadium. I'm talking about Rand Stadium. How did people have all those things that they were using to pay? You know, the match was stopped for 25 minutes before it could continue again. But when it continued, now, there I must give the Boers credit. Yeah, I must give them credit. Because that's when June 16 was supposed to have started. But these guys, because I was thinking now, from where we were sitting, I know when you get out of the stadium, just behind us, there was a PP garage there. I was already thinking that if this thing starts, I'm going to set that petrol station on fire. It will burn this whole place. And I'm not the only one. I don't think I was the only one who was thinking that way. No, the Boers behaved themselves. Oh yeah, here's another point here. So whilst they were throwing these missiles, Iwet tried to come there and calm us down, said, "Fuck off, Iwet." Iwet was our president of Kaizer Chiefs. Then your journalists also were busy trying to take it, and we're hitting them as well, because we know those pictures are going to serve as evidence of who was throwing what missile and all those things. So we were not allowing them either. But then, at some point, one Boer from this side, when things were beginning, but still it was just mayhem there, this Boer comes a policeman with what's name on a leash, an Alsatian, a dog. He comes, he stands in front of us there. We're sitting there. Then he's pointing somewhere behind me at somebody. I'm sure he saw this person throwing a missile. But that boy, I don't think he was from Johannesburg. Honestly, he must have been from somewhere in the Free State. So he points at that guy. Yeah. We say, no, go mahalo mbas. The bloody idiot comes. He passes even where I was sitting with Sheila. He passes where we were seated. He's going to that guy that he had pointed. I don't even know who was that. So, just halfway up the ramps, we saw this bull rolling. No. What happened first? It was first the dog. These pirates guys, the Kwaitos, we didn't hear the dog barking. We just saw it is rolling now, falling to the ground. And this guy, this bull, was rolling after he had been hit by a 2-liter Coke. He rolled and fell to the ground. They removed him quickly. I don't know what happened to him, whether he died or not. They would never have told us. So anyway, eventually the match resumed and Kaizer Chiefs won. I think the score was 2-1 in favor of Kaizer Chiefs. So as we're going out now of the stadium, I'm saying, guys, we'll find these boys waiting for us on Soweto Highway. You know, in a chorus, people say, bangabe bafike kahle, bangabe bafika. You know, everybody was in that spirit. Guess what? We got into our cars. We drove home. There was nothing on the way. But our families were worried because they were following what was happening. There was no TV then. Our families were worried.
Listening on the radio.
Listening on the radio because there was war there. There was real war, Siswam. But the Boers failed to commit the mistake that they committed on June 16, 1976. Because the biggest mistake of the Boers on June 16, 1976 was to open fire on school children. That was the beginning of the end of the rule of the Boers. Can we stop it here?
Yes, we can. And then we'll have our part 2. Thank you, Ndate. Thank you.
My
so
pleasure.
We're looking forward to the part 2 is coming up, guys. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. Remember to always watch the adverts till the end. That is how you contribute. Thank you to the members who are helping us keep our lights on. And we'll see you again for part 2 next time.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into e off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.